We've come to this Torah portion, Beha'alotcha. It's one of the several sections in the Torah that begins with commands for the temple menorah. The name of the portion is when you mount up or when you lift up. This translation chose to say when you erect the lights, but it means to lift up the lights. It gives commands for Aaron to light the 7 lamps that were on the top of the branches of the menorah and to arrange them in such a way as to cast their light towards the middle front of the lampstand. It's similar to Leviticus 24, which we saw a while back. That was actually a bat mitzvah portion this year, wasn't it? In Parsha Emor, which also speaks of the temple menorah. But that portion told of the oil for the lamps that was to be prepared in a very special way. The olives in that were supposed to be beaten and not pressed in order to bring forth the pure oil. That laborious task was by no means the most efficient way to extract oil from olives. The olives, but that was the only way that the purest oil could be produced for the purpose that it was to serve. And the Haftorah I mentioned earlier, connected with this, is from Ezekiel. It's Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 10, all the way to 4:7, which includes the prophet's heavenly vision of Joshua, the high priest, being exalted, as well as a vision of the heavenly menorah also. So this week, as I studied these things, I was struck by an interesting connection that I think I found in the Haftorah and the Torah I'd like to elucidate today, if we can. It's my intention to show how the prophetic vision, the future interconnected role of Jerusalem, the Jewish people, and the grafted in nations are shown in these portions when God establishes his kingdom here on earth. We'll start with kind of the first point that you run into in this Torah portion, and that's the high priest's responsibilities. Beha'alotcha begins by telling Aaron that it is his glorious responsibility to light the 7-branch menorah each day in the tabernacle. Aaron was the most important member of the tribe of Levi, the family of priests among the Israelites, who are themselves described as a nation of priests. The Kohen Gadol, how it's said in Hebrew, the high priest. The responsibility that he has reflects the high priest's lofty role in all of this that has been declared by God. Malachi, one of the last writing prophets, in chapter 2, verses 4 through 7, I think tells us clearly what the role of the Kohen Gadol is intended to be from God's perspective. He says, "Then you will know that I have sent this command to you to be my covenant with Levi, says Adonai Tsevaot. My covenant was with him for life and shalom, and I gave them to him for reverence. So he revered me, and he was awestruck by my name. Instruction of truth was in his mouth. Injustice was not found on his lips. In shalom and uprightness he walked with me, and he turned many from iniquity. For a Kohen's lips should guard knowledge, and instruction must be sought from his mouth. For he is a messenger of Adonai Tsevaot." Speaking through the prophet, God tells us that he has a very special covenant with the house of Levi, and that the Kohen Gadol's responsibility is to speak the Torah of truth, avoid injustice, and walk in shalom and in uprightness. He is to turn many from iniquity. His lips guard knowledge. And people are to turn to the Kohen Gadol to receive Torah. Why? Because it says he is a malach of Adonai, Tsevaot, a messenger. That's the word we always translate as angel. So literally he's being called an angel of Adonai. So lighting the lamps and focusing their light before them is really a symbolic act of his divine calling, profound responsibility, and his eternal covenant with God. And perhaps this last part, the eternal covenant, is why a very unusual word is used in this command. In the Hebrew sentence that is chapter 8, verse 2, it says, B'ha'alotcha et hanerot el mul penei hamenorah ya'ira shevat hanerot. When you cause to rise, b'ha'alotcha, or to set up the lamps, it says el mul, and we most often say in front. 7 lamps shall give light before the face of the menorah. That's literally how it says it. The command is to arrange the lamps in such a way that their light is directed before the front of the menorah. And this phrase, el mul, the word mul, is very difficult to translate because it's a noun with a very different meaning. Our sense of the sentence is that the light needs to be in the front of the menorah. We get the gist from the sentence. But making sense of the words is challenging. You see, mul is the word for circumcision. I'm puzzled on this, and not being any sort of real Hebrew scholar, it's probably way past me. But I get the sense that we need to really rely on what Malachi said to give us a hint at the importance of Aaron's responsibility to light the menorah. It relates to the light of the covenant. If it's using this word circumcision, that's of course a sign of the covenant. This is God's light that Aaron is responsible for, whether we are talking about the knowledge of Torah or bringing true justice to Israel, officiating at all the sacrifices, officiating at all the festivals, entering the Holy of Holies once a year. All of these things, all of them in totality, are the covenantal responsibilities, and they rest squarely on the shoulders of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol must internalize these responsibilities in his heart, and therefore his heart must be a circumcised heart. Remember that he actually does carry on his shoulders 2 stones, and on those are engraved the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. So he really does carry Israel on his shoulders. Of all the Jews that ever lived, none have had more Torah obligations and responsibilities than the Kohen Gadol. Not all Torah commands apply to all people, but the Kohen Gadol, literally the messenger of God, is responsible for the vast majority of them. So throwing in this word mul in telling him how to arrange the lights is, I believe, a strong hint at the high priest's profound responsibility in mediating and maintaining the covenantal relationship between God and his people. After this instruction for the lighting of the lamps, the Torah reminds us that the temple menorah is merely a pattern of the heavenly menorah that God showed to Moses on the mountain. Again, emphasizing the Kohen's profound responsibility of operating in the house which connects heaven to earth. To summarize the first part of this that we've just looked at in a couple of words, for the nation of Israel to function as God intended, the high priest must fulfill some very lofty and demanding responsibilities. Greater responsibilities than any other Jew, for he is considered a messenger of God, an angel of God. Now we can move on to the next thing that you encounter in this Torah portion, the taking of the Levites. The Torah kind of shifts gears a little bit. We've just been through Numbers, and so there was all those repeated accountings of tribes and fathers' houses and numbers and all that. And you probably noticed in that the tribe of Levi was specifically exempted from that. That was counting for military service. So we see tribe of Levi exempted from military service. They were counted separately, and they did not even contribute a wagon load of contributions like all of the other houses did. And here we find out why. Numbers 8:6. Take the Levites from among the Israelites and cleanse them. Their entire bodies will be shaved. They will be sprinkled with water, with the ashes of the red heifer. Their clothes will be washed completely. They will resemble newborns, and they will be brought before the tent of meeting. And we talked about this in my class today. All that is done to them is the same thing that's done to a Nazirite for the Nazirite vow. Then God commands that the entire assembly of Israel, the entire community, is to be assembled. Remember how many that is. The military-age males amount to 603,000, but when you take into account everyone else, it's a couple million. So bring a couple million people together and have a couple million people lay their hands on these Levites, on these few tens of thousands of Levites. They've been shaved and cleansed with the water of purification. And then after that, once they've received that, whatever is passed on to them, they will be designated as a wave offering before Adonai so that they will serve Adonai. Then the Levites, in turn, who've just received 2 million people on them, are to lay their hands on a couple of bulls, a bull of a sin offering and another bull of a whole burnt offering. Think about that process. That's kind of a big deal. The Levites are cleansed completely with the ashes of the red heifer. That means that that if any of them had been defiled by a corpse, that was covered, that was taken care of. They were fit. They were tahor. They were fit to be served. Then they receive all the impurity of the house of Israel upon their beings. Then they transfer that impurity to the substitutes, to the bulls. And the bulls then are offered on the altar. The Levites have begun their role as mediators, as a part of the process of the intercessory removal of sin from the children of Israel. First taking it on themselves, then transferring it to the animal, which are then consumed on the altar. It's kind of like a conveyor belt of sorts. They have this responsibility to take that on and move it. The Torah explains, starting at verse 13, have the Levites stand before Aaron and his sons and present them as a wave offering to Adonai. In this way, you are to set apart the Levites from Bnei Israel to be mine. After you have purified them and presented them as a wave offering, the Levites will come to do their work in the tent of meeting. For they are the ones from among Bnei Israel given to me in place of all the first from the wombs of Bnei Israel. I have taken them for myself. So now we understand what has happened. Remember in Egypt that the price paid to free Israel from Egypt was death of the firstborn of Egypt. And when that happened, all the firstborn of Israel belonged to Adonai. And it was expected culturally in the Middle East that the firstborn son acts sort of as the priest of the household. Israel's sons then, firstborn sons, then took on the responsibility of priests. But then remember that God had a special redemption for firstborn sons that we read about in Leviticus. The Pidyon Haben, 5 shekels, they were to be redeemed. Why were they to be redeemed? Here's why. We just learned it. Because God planned to take the Levites in place of all of the firstborn sons to serve the high priest, to perform the duties of the tabernacle. That is, the duties of maintaining and running the one place on earth where redemption and covering of sin was possible. And what does God say 3 times about these Levites? They are mine, they are mine, they are mine. I've taken them to me. To summarize this point, in order to assist the Kohen Gadol in his awesome responsibilities, all the males of the tribe of Levi who were not of Aaron's sons were taken by God to be his very own, to serve his high priest. They were assigned to assist Aaron in the operation and the maintenance of the wilderness tabernacle and ultimately the Jerusalem temple. What a magnificent responsibility they have to take on that role of receiving the impurity of the Israelites, passing it on to the offerings, and then passing that on to the priests for an offering. We talked again in my class today. There's also a commandment in here that they could only do that for 25 years. It's a short work cycle in their life. Their career is limited to 25 years. We do the same thing with law enforcement and first responders. Why? Because it's hard on them. Because being a first responder wears you out. Because being responsible for the safety of your fellow man wears you out. So you have a limited time to serve. Same thing for them, that they have a huge responsibility and only serve in the prime of life, and then they get to stop, the first retirement plan. So let's go on now and take a look at the Haftarah. This is the third point I wanted to take a look at. Zechariah 2:14 through 17 says, "Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I am coming, and I will live among you. It is a declaration of Adonai. In that day, many nations will join themselves to Adonai, and they will be my people, and I will dwell among you. Then you will know that Adonai Tsevaot has sent me to you. Adonai will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will once again choose Jerusalem. Be silent before Adonai, all flesh, for he has aroused himself from his holy dwelling." Daughter of Zion, that is Jerusalem and its surrounding towns. They are to rejoice because God is coming to dwell where? Among you. But please note how the pronouns work in this text. I am coming to live among you. Then you will know that he sent me. Pronouns do matter, by the way, which I think is why the enemy is trying to confuse them. I am coming to live among you. Then you will know that he sent me. I and he appear as 2 unique entities in this verse. There are a couple of possibilities for this, if you're going to sit down and analyze this. One, the I and the me are Zechariah himself, who's receiving this word. When these things happen, that is, the attaching of the Goyim, the nations, to Adonai, and the presence of Adonai dwelling among this mixed group of Israel and the nations, then the audience that Zechariah is talking to will know that God sent Zechariah. That's one way to look at it. However, it doesn't seem necessarily plausible because in Zechariah's time, this didn't happen. The nations didn't attach themselves to Israel. Zechariah was there towards the very end, towards the end of the exile as the Israelites were coming back. Another interpretation seems more plausible. The second possibility is that the words are the words of Messiah speaking through Zechariah. And that seems to make more sense. I, the Messiah, am coming to live among you. Then you will know that he sent me. This is supported entirely by our New Covenant scriptures, isn't it? Which proclaim the wondrous appearance of Yeshua, who has made all these things happen. Acts 15 marks the place to be the beginning of the fulfillment of this. The idea that the nations attach themselves to God. Paul will speak of these things famously in Romans chapter 11 when he uses the metaphor of grafting in branches to an olive tree. Many goyim will attach themselves to Adonai, is what he said. And that's precisely what Paul is saying happened through the blood of Yeshua. Please note that there is a second parallel promise in this text. Adonai will inherit Judah in the Holy Land as his portion. You hear the complete good news there. We talk about the complete good news. The complete good news is that Judah, that is the Jewish people, will be God's inheritance once again in the Holy Land, and the attached nations, or Gentiles, will also be God's people. Also. This is nothing less than the ingathering of Israel, the restoration of Israel, the unification of Jerusalem, and Jew and Gentile one in Messiah. All of these things are a part of the good news. It's not just one little part of the good news, it's all part of the good news. And some of these things we've seen. The ingathering, the founding of Israel in 1948, the unification of Jerusalem in 1967, and Beth Shalom and many places like it are exactly what we talk about. Jew and Gentile, one in Messiah. These are prophetic words. It's not some mystical, supernatural thing. Look next to you. It's happening right here. This is it. He says it's a declaration of Adonai. That is, it is an absolute certainty. Much of it has happened. We're living in a time of fulfillment, and with the events of this week, who knows what else we are going to see. So moving along, the Haftorah takes us to the prophet's vision of Joshua the high priest standing before the messenger of the Lord. That's Zechariah chapter 3, 1 through 6. Then he showed me Joshua the Kohen Gadol standing before the angel of Adonai and the accuser, Hasatan, standing at his right hand to accuse him. Adonai said to the Satan, Adonai rebukes you, the Satan. Indeed, Adonai, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebukes you. Is not this man a brand plucked out of the fire? Now Joshua was wearing filthy garments and standing before the angel, who answered and spoke to those standing before him, saying, remove the filthy garments from him. Then to Joshua he said, see, I have removed your iniquity from you and will dress you with fine clothing. Then I said, place a clean turban on his head. So they put a pure turban on his head and clothed him with garments, while the angel of Adonai stood by. The accuser was standing there. This is a heavenly vision that Zechariah had. What was the accuser doing? Well, he was accusing, right? He was accusing. Because the angel of the Lord says, may the Lord rebuke you. This man is a brand plucked from the fire. This imagery is seen elsewhere, specifically in Isaiah, in his epiphany, when the brand is taken from the heavenly altar and purges Isaiah's unclean lips. Without going too far into that, the brand plucked from the fire is altar imagery. It's imagery of the altar. It denotes purity and righteousness. In this case, Joshua, the Kohen Gadol, who was high priest during the construction of the second temple by Zerubbabel and Ezra 70 years after the exile. And what were we talking about? Joshua was covered in filthy garments. What's the role of the Levites? To take on the impurities of the entire nation. So this moment is the taking on of the impurities and the taking off of the impurities. Now, we often make reference to this part of Zechariah as an obvious image of Yeshua and his exaltation as our high priest of the order of Melchizedek, which it certainly is. Today, I want to focus on something else we don't normally look at. It has to do with the expectations that God has for the high priest that we talked about. Verses 7 through about half of 8. Thus says Adonai Tsevaot, if you will walk in my ways and keep my charge, then you will judge my house and watch over my courts, and I will give you a place to walk among these standing here. Listen well, Joshua Kohen Gadol, both you and your companions seating before you, because they are men who are a sign. I'm going to stop right there. Look at what's been said so far. All the responsibilities that we talked about above. Walk in my ways, keep my charge, judge my house, watch over my courts. The covenantal responsibility of the eternal covenant with Levi. But notice more. I will give you a place among these standing here. Where is this vision happening? It's in the heavenly court, in the heavenly Jerusalem. There are men standing in the heavenly court among the angels, and even Satan as the accuser. This is God's courtroom, which is the heavenly Jerusalem. We're not given the identity of these men, but we are told that this moment, which occurred in the heavenly Jerusalem some 2,500 years ago, when the second temple was just being constructed, was a sign. So this thing that happened was a sign. Not a sign that we could see. The only one who saw this sign was Zechariah. But a sign that we are told happened nonetheless. Zechariah was the only human that was able to see it. So let's hear what this wonderful ordination ceremony is a sign for. The rest of the verse. Behold, I will bring forth my servant, the branch. For behold, the stone I have laid before Joshua is one stone with 7 facets. On it I will engrave an inscription, declares Adonai Tsevaot, that I will remove the iniquity of this land in one day. This is talking about none other than the Messiah, the branch of David, my servant, the branch. This is Yeshua, who happens to share a name with Joshua, the high priest. Yeshua is just a shortened form of Joshua. On this mysterious stone that is laid before Yehoshua will be engraved an inscription that says, I will remove the iniquity of this land in one day. The stone imagery here, described in verses 6 and 7. Then he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of armies. What are you, you great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain, and he will bring out Eben Rosh, the chief stone, with shouts of grace, grace to it. Zerubbabel laid the foundation of the second temple. He had the chief stone, the Eben Rosh, the chief stone laid, which set the orientation and the position of the entire temple on the Temple Mount. When you first place that first stone in the corner, that sets the rest of it. God is telling us that the second temple was intimately connected to the coming of the branch, that is the Messiah. Zerubbabel, a descendant of David and the governor of the Persian province of Judah, played a key role in creating the setting for the coming of Messiah. That's what that prophecy says. The joyful sounds of chen, chen, grace, grace, accompanied the laying of that foundation stone, which prepared the way for the coming of God's grace in the flesh and the neshama of Messiah Yeshua some 500 years later, the branch from the stump of Jesse. Yeshua loved the temple, and he jealously guarded it. In John chapter 2, verse 16, to those selling doves, he said, "Get these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Judean leaders responded, "What sign do you show us since you are doing these things?" And he said, "Destroy this temple." Yeshua answered them, "And in 3 days I will raise it up." The Judean leaders then said to him, 46 years this temple was being built, and you will raise it up in 3 days? But he was talking about the temple of his body. So after he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he was talking about this. Then they believed the scripture and the word that Yeshua had spoken. Yeshua identified himself with the temple. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. There's a lot of implications to these things. See if we can pull some of it together. Maybe we'll start from the last to the first. Yeshua made an equivalency between his role as Messiah and the temple because the function is similar. Yes? It's an intercessory program meant to take away sin. The earthly temple was subject to destruction and took great effort to rebuild. Yeshua's flesh was also destroyed, but rebuilt miraculously in 3 days. And this brought with it what? Chen, grace, grace. Zerubbabel had laid the foundation stone of the second temple with shouts of grace, grace. But Matthew 1 tells us that Zerubbabel was in the physical line of Messiah, specifically kind of like a stone, if you will, in the lineage that built the Messiah. So Zerubbabel both set the foundation stone of the temple and also the post-exilic ancestral foundation stone of Messiah, to which we shout grace, grace. Peter, Shimon Kepha, he understood this. He said, as you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men but chosen by God. And again, he quoted Isaiah, see, I lay in Zion a precious cornerstone. The one who trusts in him will never be put to shame. And Psalm 118:22 says, the stone the builders rejected has become the Rosh Pinah, the chief cornerstone. It's all temple imagery, which links Messiah to the temple. Next, the temple requires a responsible group of stewards and workers. These are the line of Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and the dedicated Levite workers. The Kohen Gadol had the greatest responsibility of all Jews. God took all the rest of the Levite family to himself, purchased at a great price to guard and serve the temple. Now the temple was a copy of the heavenly temple. And the book of Hebrews tells us that Yeshua is our Kohen Gadol after the eternal order of Melchizedek, not after the order of Aaron, the Aaronic priest, but an eternal order. He is not a mortal priest on earth, but a high priest in the heavenly temple who serves forever. And again, 1 Peter 1:5, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Messiah Yeshua. And like the Levites of Beha'alotecha, you were taken to him. That is, we were all bought with a very high price. Thus you serve the high priest on whose shoulders rests the greatest responsibility. As Yeshua himself said before his ascension into the heavenly temple, he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Remember at the beginning of this now lengthy sermon, the high priest was to focus the light of the covenant into the holy place in front of the menorah. The high priest was responsible for shining the light, and it was his dedicated Levite servants that were responsible for preparing the kosher lamp oil. So too, you and I. Yeshua, our Kohen Gadol, shines the light into the darkness of the world. You and I, his dedicated servants, and his holy priesthood are responsible for tending the light of Messiah, for even building the house of the Lord in ourselves, in and amongst ourselves. That is our calling. That is our service. And there is no higher service. Amen.